Is nuclear energy a responsible energy source? By Joseph Ward. First, let's take a look at how nuclear power works. Uranium-235 molecules are hit with neutrons in a reaction called fission, and because that element is so unstable, it breaks apart and collides with other molecules, which collides with others in a forced chain reaction. Now, inside a nuclear reactor, molecules break apart and release heat, which heats water in a heat exchanger. This evaporates into steam, and that steam turns a turbine, generating the energy. Let's take a look at a couple of pros and cons of nuclear energy. The pros are that these type of power plants emit a low level of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. They're a steady source of electricity, and it has relatively lower cost of operations. It also reduces our dependence on fossil fuels. The cons are that disposing of the radioactive waste used by power plants is difficult because it's so toxic. It's possible to take the technology from nuclear power plants and make them into nuclear weapons, although many countries have signed non-proliferation treaty. There is also the possibility of deadly accidents occurring, such as Fukushima. Fukushima is the biggest nuclear power plant disaster in recent history. On March 11, 2011, a magnitude 9 earthquake hit the east coast of Honshu, Japan, which was followed by a tsunami. The tsunami resulted in a loss of the heat sink for the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station. In the following days, the seawater-cooled diesel generator failed, and the flooding disabled electricity from reaching the components and safety equipment. The extensive damage prevented the accident management system from being activated, resulting in damaged reactor cores. The release of radioactive material caused more than 140,000 residents to evacuate the area. Decontamination costs could exceed 11 trillion yen. Since Fukushima, there has been a strong backlash against nuclear power in Japan. This 2016 survey in the country showed that 50% of Japanese think that nuclear power is only necessary for the time being, but should be abolished in the future. An additional 31% don't even think that nuclear power is necessary right now, and 16% of respondents say that nuclear power is a necessary power source. Could a major nuclear accident happen in the United States? Here's a map that shows accidents reported to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission during the month of December 2017 alone. There were 7 accidents reported. These include minor accidents or ones that were quickly repaired, and there was also one emergency at the St. Lucie, Florida plant because a smoke alarm went off, which wasn't able to be addressed in 15 minutes. And this isn't even including the November 30th, 2017 earthquake in New Jersey that caused 2 nuclear power plants to declare temporary emergencies, which is common practice until assessments can be made that no damage or injuries occurred due to the earthquake. No damage or injuries were found at the New Jersey power plants after the earthquake. It's important to note that upgraded reactors have a negative temperature coefficient of reactivity, which means that as the temperature increases, negative reactivity is added to the core. Now, this feature greatly reduces the chance for an explosion or a meltdown. The Waste Isolation Pilot Plant is the most elaborate deep nuclear waste repository in the world. It's like a big nuclear bunker. Located east of Carlsbad, New Mexico, it was approved by Congress in 1992 and received its first shipment of nuclear waste in 1999. It will continue to accept waste as it has room for 850,000 drums of nuclear waste. It experienced a very costly accident in 2014. Now, this Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, or WIPP, has been opposed by several citizen groups. Oklahoma Representative Mike Synar was a prominent figure against the WIPP. He said that the program was guided by the philosophy of do it quickly rather than do it right. He publicized internal reports that said that WIPP engineers weren't certain the repository could be operated safely. He also brought up issues of hazards of transportation of nuclear waste to the site, which come across the country. Let's take a look at a few ethical considerations of nuclear energy. For nuclear power, Kantian ethicists would want to enact nuclear practices only if they could be willed as a universal law for other nuclear power plants to practice. They would also insist that people be treated as ends in themselves, not as a means to something else. Utilitarians would be concerned with maximizing the human benefits of nuclear energy while minimizing the harms. Although Leopold would say that a form of energy generation is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of its biotic community, and it's wrong if it does otherwise. Leopold would most likely prefer renewable energy with natural air-based and water-based heating and cooling rather than nuclear energy. From an environmental point of view, nuclear energy plants don't release carbon dioxide or soot, which is a good thing. However, it does produce liquid toxic wastes that have to be stored and managed for thousands of years, and this waste is extremely poisonous to living organisms and can get into the water supply, so this is a drawback. It can also be especially destructive to the ecosystem in the case of an explosion or a meltdown. Here's my references. Here's my opinion on the matter. Part of the issue with Fukushima was that it was an old reactor, and there was hesitancy on behalf of the people to invest in nuclear power upgrades, so it was missing certain safeguards. Energy prices are an important consideration in ethics and human well-being. To provide an example, France gets 72% of its power from nuclear energy, whereas Germany only gets 14% of it from nuclear energy. The household price per kilowatt hour in France is 45% cheaper than that of Germany. This shows that nuclear power can help keep utility costs down. Nuclear power is a stable, predictable energy supply, unlike some renewables, so it's a good addition to a country's energy supply. So the ethical approach I take is anthropocentrism, putting human well-being first and using cost-benefit analysis while still respecting nature. Here's a summary of what we talked about today. We looked at how nuclear power works, the pros and cons of nuclear power. We detailed the Fukushima disaster. We took a look at accidents at nuclear power plants in the last month in the US. And we looked at the waste isolation pilot plant. We talked about the ethical considerations of nuclear power, and I gave you my opinion. Here are a couple of discussion questions to consider. The first major question people would ask about nuclear power is, where can we safely contain the nuclear waste in an ethical way? Also, are nuclear power authorities transparent enough? Lastly, are nuclear hazards different from other hazards we already accept every day? Thank you for listening.